Dr. Adrian Keller trudged through the Scottish Highlands, the whispering winds a constant, eerie companion. The landscape, with its jagged hills and mist-covered valleys, seemed to swallow all sound, leaving only the echo of his own footsteps. Adrian's colleagues, Dr. Samantha Ortiz and Dr. Marcus Shaw, followed closely behind, their expressions mirroring the desolate landscape around them. The abandoned research facility loomed ahead, a decaying relic against the gray sky. Rusted fences leaned precariously, their barbed wire twisted and broken. The facility itself was a sprawling, shadowy complex, its windows shattered and doors hanging off hinges. Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Highland wind. "Looks like something out of a horror movie," Marcus muttered, his breath visible in the cold air. Samantha nodded, her eyes scanning the building with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Hard to believe this place was once a hub of scientific advancement. Adrian adjusted his backpack and stepped forward, leading the way through the broken gate. The path to the main entrance was overgrown with weeds, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Every step felt like a journey deeper into the past, into a place where time had stopped and left only shadows behind. The entrance hall was a cavernous space, empty except for the remnants of what must have been a reception area. Papers were scattered across the floor, yellowed with age, and the walls were lined with peeling paint. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling and the distant sound of dripping water. Adrian shone his flashlight around the room, the beam cutting through the dim light. "Let's split up and see what we can find. Be careful and stay in radio contact." Marcus headed towards what looked like an office area, while Samantha moved to explore a corridor leading deeper into the facility. Adrian made his way to a set of stairs descending into the basement, his footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The basement was even darker, the air thicker and colder. Adrian's flashlight revealed rows of shelves filled with decaying equipment and crates marked with cryptic symbols. As he moved deeper, he found a locked door, its surface scratched and dented as if someone or something had tried to break through from the other side. Curiosity gnawed at him. He pulled a set of keys from his pocket, hoping one might fit the ancient lock. On the third try, the key turned, and the door creaked open, revealing a small, cluttered office. A desk sat against the far wall, piled high with papers and old lab equipment. But it was the cabinet in the corner that caught Adrian's eye. It was marked with the same cryptic symbols he had seen on the crates. He opened the cabinet and found a set of files, their edges frayed and covers stained. The top file was labeled SCP-3199 Initial Observations. Adrian's heart raced as he opened it, scanning the first page. The text was fragmented and disturbing, filled with references to a biological entity capable of rapid reproduction and extreme aggression. Adrian's radio crackled to life, breaking the silence. "Adrian, you there?" Samantha's voice was tense, almost fearful. "Yeah, I'm here. I found something," he replied, still staring at the file. "Meet me in the basement. We might have a bigger problem than we thought." As he waited for his colleagues, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far more sinister than an abandoned research facility. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen, as if the building itself were holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover its darkest secrets. Adrian's flashlight flickered over the shadowy expanse of the basement as Samantha and Marcus joined him. Their faces were tight with unease, eyes wide in the dim light. The cryptic notes in Adrian's hand felt like a tangible weight, an unsettling harbinger of what lay ahead. "We need to get a better look at these files," Adrian said, spreading them out on a decaying table in the center of the room. The pages were brittle, yellowed with age, and filled with disturbing annotations. Sketches of grotesque, vaguely humanoid creatures were interspersed with scientific data, half-finished observations, and ominous warnings. Samantha leaned in, her brow furrowing. "These drawings. They look like something out of a nightmare." What were they doing here? Adrian shook his head, his eyes scanning the fragmented text. Whatever it wasn't anything good. Look at this. Subject exhibits rapid cellular regeneration and aggressive behavior. Containment protocols failing. This isn't just any biological entity. This is something far worse. Marcus paced the room, the floor creaking under his boots. So what do we do now? This place is falling apart, and who knows how many of these things are still around. We need to document everything, Adrian replied, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Every detail, every clue. If we understand what happened here, maybe we can figure out how to stop it. The team split up again, each taking a section of the facility to explore. Adrian headed towards the laboratory wing, the air growing colder and more unsettling with each step. The walls were lined with broken glass and twisted metal, remnants of experiments gone awry. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, giving the impression of movement where there was none. He entered a large lab, its once sterile environment now a chaotic mess of overturned tables and scattered equipment. The stench of decay was overpowering, and Adrian had to cover his nose with his sleeve as he navigated the room. His flashlight beam settled on a large metal containment unit, its door hanging open. Inside were more of the cryptic symbols, along with deep scratches that looked worryingly fresh. In the back of the lab, he found a computer terminal, surprisingly intact. He booted it up, the screen flickering to life with a dim glow. Files filled with fragmented data and corrupted videos flashed before him, but one folder stood out: SCP-3199 observations. Adrian clicked on the first video file, and the screen filled with grainy footage of a creature that defied comprehension. It was vaguely humanoid, but its features were distorted, grotesque. It moved with a terrifying, unnatural speed, attacking a group of researchers with ruthless efficiency. The video cut off abruptly, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and panicked shouts. "Adrian, you need to see this." Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, breaking the tense silence. "On my way," Adrian replied, tearing his eyes away from the screen. He made his way back through the labyrinthine corridors, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. He found Marcus and Samantha in what appeared to be a control room, its walls lined with monitors displaying various parts of the facility. Marcus pointed to one of the screens. "Look at this. It's a live feed. There are still creatures moving around in here." Adrian's stomach dropped as he watched the grainy footage of an SCP-3199 specimen prowling the dark hallways. "We need to be careful. These things are still very much alive, and they're hunting." Samantha's voice was barely above a whisper. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Adrian took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "We need to stay focused. Let's gather as much information as we can and figure out a way to contain this before it gets out of hand." The team worked in a tense silence, the weight of the cryptic notes and the haunting images pressing down on them. The deeper they delved into the facility's secrets, the more unsettling their discoveries became. The sense of foreboding grew with each passing moment, a creeping fear that they had awakened something that should have remained hidden. As the hours passed, the facility seemed to close in around them, the walls echoing with whispers of forgotten horrors. The unsettling atmosphere was almost palpable, a reminder that they were not alone in the decaying darkness. Adrian's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, the dim light of the computer screen casting eerie shadows on his face. The basement lab had become their temporary headquarters, a nerve center amid the encroaching darkness. Samantha and Marcus huddled around him, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. "These files are fragmented, but there's enough here to start piecing things together," Adrian said, scrolling through pages of scientific data, chilling observations, and haunting sketches. The file labeled SCP-3199 Initial Observations was particularly disturbing. Adrian read aloud, his voice tense. "Subject exhibits rapid cellular regeneration, making it nearly impossible to kill. It reproduces through a process similar to budding, producing eggs that hatch within minutes. Subject is highly aggressive and demonstrates a high degree of cunning. Samantha leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the text. This thing is a perfect predator. No wonder they were so desperate to contain it. Marcus frowned, his gaze fixed on a grainy photograph of SCP-3199 in mid-attack. And they failed. What chance do we have if these guys couldn't handle it? Adrian sighed, rubbing his temples. We need to understand its weaknesses. There must be something they missed or didn't have time to exploit. Keep looking for anything that might give us an edge. Samantha moved to a nearby filing cabinet, rifling through old reports and diagrams. The smell of mold and decay was overpowering, but she ignored it, driven by a grim sense of purpose. Here's something, she said, pulling out a file labeled Containment Breach. Adrian took the file, his eyes narrowing as he read. During the breach, researchers noted that SCP-3199 avoided high-pitched sounds. They tried using sonic deterrence, but it wasn't enough to stop them. Marcus nodded. It's a start. Maybe we can amplify that somehow, create a barrier or a trap. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities. We'll need to find the equipment to generate those frequencies. There must be something in this facility we can use. The trio continued their search, moving deeper into the facility's dark recesses. Each room they entered was a testament to the horrors that had occurred here. Broken equipment, scattered notes, and occasionally the remnants of what had once been human researchers. In one lab, Adrian found a series of vials labeled SCP-3199 sample. He picked one up, the liquid inside glowing faintly. These might help us understand its biology better. If we can figure out how it regenerates, maybe we can find a way to counteract it. Samantha nodded, her eyes lingering on a nearby wall covered in frantic scribbles. Someone here was trying to find a solution. Look at this. Chemical formulas, genetic sequences. It's like they were racing against time. Marcus joined them, holding up a notebook filled with haunting sketches and annotations. And losing. These drawings are from the last days before the breach. They were desperate, terrified. Adrian took the notebook, flipping through the pages. Each sketch was more disturbing than the last, depicting SCP-3199 in various stages of attack and reproduction. The annotations spoke of sleepless nights, failed experiments, and a growing sense of hopelessness. We're not giving up, Adrian said firmly, closing the notebook. We have the advantage of hindsight. We know what we're dealing with, and we have the tools to stop it. As they gathered their findings, the sense of dread deepened. The facility seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if the very walls remembered the horrors they had witnessed. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to lengthen, creeping ever closer. Returning to the makeshift headquarters, Adrian spread their findings across the table. We need to consolidate this information and formulate a plan. The more we know, the better our chances. Samantha nodded, her face set with grim determination. Agreed. But we can't stay here forever. We need to act fast before these things realize we're here. Marcus glanced at the screens displaying the live feed of SCP-3199's movements. They're already getting closer. We need to move quickly. Adrian took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down on him. Then let's get to work. We have a lot to do, and not much time to do it. As they delved deeper into the files, the fragmented data painted a chilling picture of SCP-3199's origins and capabilities. The more they learned, the clearer it became that they were facing a formidable and malevolent force. But Adrian held on to a sliver of hope, determined to find a way to end the nightmare that had begun in this forsaken facility. The shadows outside their small pool of light seemed to press in closer, and the unsettling silence was broken only by the rustle of papers and the occasional distant drip of water. Each new discovery brought a fresh wave of foreboding, but Adrian refused to let fear take hold. They had a job to do, and the survival of humanity might very well depend on it. The tension in the air was palpable as Adrian, Samantha, and Marcus moved through the facility's decaying corridors. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the fluorescent lights, seemed to herald an unseen threat lurking just beyond their vision. The deeper they ventured, the more the oppressive silence bore down on them, broken only by the distant, eerie sounds of water dripping from cracked pipes. Adrian's grip tightened around his flashlight as they approached a large, rusted door marked containment area. He exchanged a wary glance with Samantha, whose face was pale but resolute. Marcus, bringing up the rear, muttered a quick prayer under his breath. "Ready?" Adrian asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Samantha nodded, and Marcus gave a grim thumbs up. Together they heaved the heavy door open, the rusted hinges screeching in protest. The room beyond was vast and shadowy, filled with the remnants of containment units and scientific equipment. The stench of decay was overpowering, and Adrian had to fight the urge to gag. They moved cautiously, flashlights sweeping over the dark corners of the room. Broken glass crunched underfoot, and the sense of foreboding grew with each step. In the center of the room, a large containment unit lay shattered, its contents long gone. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest, the implications clear. "Stay alert," he whispered, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. A sudden blood-curdling screech echoed through the room, sending a jolt of fear through the team. Adrian spun around, his flashlight beam catching a glimpse of a monstrous figure darting behind a row of overturned tables. The creature was tall and gaunt, its pale skin stretched taut over elongated limbs. Its eyes, dark and soulless, locked onto Adrian's for a brief, terrifying moment before it vanished into the shadows. "Did you see that?" Marcus hissed, his voice trembling. "Yeah," Adrian replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everyone stay close and keep your eyes peeled." They moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The screech came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Adrian's flashlight beam caught a flash of movement, and he felt a surge of adrenaline as the creature lunged at them from the darkness. "Look out," Samantha screamed, raising her weapon. The creature was upon them in an instant, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Adrian barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as the claws missed him by inches. Samantha fired her weapon, the gunshots echoing deafeningly in the confined space. The bullets struck the creature, but it barely seemed to notice, its eyes fixed on Adrian with a malevolent intelligence. Marcus grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and swung it at the creature, connecting with a sickening thud. The creature shrieked in rage, turning its attention to Marcus and slashing at him with a ferocity that sent him sprawling to the ground, blood spurting from a deep gash in his arm. "Marcus," Adrian shouted, rushing to his fallen friend's side. The creature reared back, preparing to strike again, but Samantha fired another volley, this time aiming for its head. The creature screeched in pain, retreating into the shadows with unsettling speed. The room fell silent, the only sound Marcus's labored breathing and the distant drip of water. "Is it gone?" Samantha asked, her voice shaking. "For now," Adrian replied, helping Marcus to his feet. "But it won't stay gone for long. We need to get out of here." They hurried back the way they had come, every shadow seeming to pulse with hidden danger. The facility, once a monument to scientific progress, had become a nightmarish labyrinth. The adrenaline from the encounter still coursed through Adrian's veins. The image of the creature's dark, soulless eyes burned into his memory. As they reached the relative safety of their makeshift headquarters, Adrian collapsed into a chair, trying to catch his breath. Marcus was pale and sweating, clutching his injured arm. Samantha immediately set to work bandaging the wound, her hands shaking but determined. "We need to regroup and come up with a new plan," Adrian said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. These things are faster and smarter than we anticipated. We can't afford to underestimate them. Samantha nodded, her eyes meeting Adrian's with a mix of determination and fear. We'll figure it out. We have to. The reality of their situation was becoming increasingly clear. The creatures were not just a scientific anomaly, they were a deadly threat, a horror that defied comprehension. And as the shadows lengthened and the eerie silence pressed in around them, Adrian knew that their struggle was only just beginning. Adrian sat in the dim light of their makeshift headquarters, the flickering bulbs casting unsettling shadows on the walls. The adrenaline from their first encounter had subsided, leaving a cold dread in its place. Samantha and Marcus were both silent, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Adrian focused on the documents spread out before him, trying to decipher the fragmented research notes. The more he read, the more horrifying the implications became. SCP-3199 was not just a biological anomaly, it was a grotesque amalgamation of human and avian DNA, designed with a single purpose to reproduce and dominate. "Listen to this," Adrian said, his voice low and tense. The researchers noted that SCP-3199 can lay eggs at an alarming rate, each one hatching within minutes. Its regenerative abilities make it nearly impossible to kill, and it's highly intelligent. It learns and adapts. Samantha looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you saying this thing is designed to be unstoppable?" "More than that," Adrian replied, his fingers tracing the lines of data. "It's designed to replace us. Humans, refuted they called it. A new apex predator, one that sees us as prey." Marcus leaned back, wincing as his bandaged arm throbbed. "So what the hell do we do? If it's that smart and that tough, how do we fight it?" Adrian took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "We need to find its weakness. Every living thing has one. The notes mention that high-pitched sounds can repel it, but that's not enough. We need to dig deeper, understand its biology better." Samantha nodded, determination hardening her features. "Then let's start with these samples." She gestured to the vials of SCP-3199's biological material they had found. "If we can analyze them, maybe we can find a chink in its armor." They set up a makeshift lab, using the salvaged equipment from the facility. The work was painstaking and tense, every creak of the old building and every flicker of the lights a reminder of the lurking danger. Adrian worked methodically, isolating the genetic material and running tests, while Samantha monitored the live feeds of the facility's cameras, keeping an eye out for any sign of movement. Hours passed in a blur of data and analysis. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities and dead ends, each new discovery bringing a mix of hope and dread. The regenerative properties of SCP-3199 were unlike anything he had seen before, a complex interplay of human and avian genetics that allowed it to heal almost instantaneously. "It's like it's designed to be indestructible," Adrian muttered, frustration seeping into his voice. "But there has to be a way." Samantha glanced over at him, her expression grim. "What if the key isn't in destroying it, but in stopping its reproduction? If we can prevent it from laying eggs, we can at least contain the threat." Adrian considered this, nodding slowly. "That's a good angle. The notes mention something about a hormonal trigger for its reproductive cycle. If we can disrupt that, we might be able to buy ourselves some time." Marcus, who had been watching the monitors, suddenly stiffened. "Guys, we've got movement. South corridor, near the secondary lab." Adrian's heart raced as he joined Marcus at the monitors. The grainy feed showed a figure moving through the shadows, its pale skin and elongated limbs unmistakable. SCP-3199 was on the hunt again. "We need to move," Adrian said, his voice tight. "We can't let it get the drop on us again." They gathered their equipment, moving quickly and quietly through the darkened corridors. The facility seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The shadows felt alive, filled with the threat of unseen predators. As they approached the south corridor, Adrian signaled for the team to stop. He could hear the faint, unsettling sounds of the creature moving nearby, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down his spine. "We need to draw it out," Adrian whispered. "Samantha, do you still have the sonic deterrent?" She nodded, pulling a small device from her bag. "It's not much, but it should buy us a few seconds." Adrian took the device, his mind racing. "Okay, when it shows itself, hit the sonic deterrent, and we'll try to drive it into one of the containment units. If we can trap it, we might be able to study it more closely." They moved forward cautiously, every sense on high alert. The corridor was dark and claustrophobic, the air thick with the scent of decay. As they rounded a corner, Adrian's flashlight beam caught a flash of movement. "There," he shouted, activating the sonic deterrent. The device emitted a high-pitched scream, and the creature reeled back, screeching in pain. Adrian and Marcus lunged forward, using metal bars to corral it towards the containment unit. The creature fought with terrifying strength, its claws slashing through the air, but the sonic deterrent kept it disoriented. With a final desperate push, they managed to shove the creature into the containment unit, slamming the door shut behind it. The creature thrashed against the walls, its screeches filling the room with a bone-chilling echo. Adrian leaned against the wall, panting. "We did it. We've got it contained." Samantha's face was pale but resolute. "Now we just need to figure out how to stop it for good." The creature's screeches echoed in the background as they set to work, the sense of urgency pressing down on them. They knew they were racing against time, against a foe that was faster, stronger, and smarter than anything they had faced before. But they also knew that understanding the threat was their only chance at survival. Adrian's heart pounded as the door to the containment unit rattled with the creature's frenzied attacks. The metal buckled and groaned, but it held firm. For now, Adrian knew they had bought themselves only a little time. "We need a plan," Samantha said, her voice tinged with urgency as she paced the room. "A real one. This thing won't stay in there forever." Marcus, cradling his injured arm, nodded. "And we're not exactly in top shape to go another round with it. We have to figure out a way to contain it permanently." Adrian glanced at the makeshift lab they had set up. The research notes, the genetic samples, the sonic deterrent. They were pieces of a puzzle that needed solving fast. He took a deep breath and began sketching a containment plan on the dusty, cracked whiteboard. "All right," Adrian started, focusing on the task at hand. "First, we need to disrupt its reproductive cycle. If we can stop it from laying eggs, we reduce the immediate threat. According to the notes, its reproduction is triggered by a specific hormonal signal." Samantha moved to the board, her eyes narrowing as she considered the data. "We need a suppressant, something that can block the hormone. We might be able to synthesize one from these samples. If we inject it, we can at least slow it down." "Agreed," Marcus said, grimacing as he adjusted the bandage on his arm. "But what about its regenerative abilities? We can't keep fighting it if it heals every time we land a hit." Adrian nodded. "That's our second priority. There has to be a way to neutralize its regenerative cells. If we can destabilize its DNA structure, even temporarily, we might be able to weaken it enough to keep it contained." The plan began to take shape, each step carefully considered and outlined. They worked with meticulous precision, every movement driven by the urgency of their situation. Adrian and Samantha focused on synthesizing the hormonal suppressant, while Marcus scoured the facility for additional equipment and resources. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional screech and thud from the containment unit. Adrian's mind raced, piecing together fragments of data and theory, driven by a desperate need to find a solution. "We've got the suppressant," Samantha announced, holding up a syringe filled with a pale, viscous liquid. "If this works, it should stop the creature from reproducing for a while." "Good," Adrian replied, his eyes tired but determined. Now we need to deliver it. We'll have to get close enough to inject it directly. It's risky, but we don't have a choice. Marcus returned, carrying a portable generator and a set of heavy-duty cables. I found these in the storage room. We can use them to set up a perimeter. If we can get the creature into a confined space and hit it with a continuous electric charge, it might disrupt its regenerative process. Perfect, Adrian said, nodding. We lure it into the trap, inject the suppressant, and then hit it with everything we've got. They moved quickly, setting up the generator and running the cables through the facility's narrow corridors. The plan was precarious, but it was their best shot. As they worked, the sense of urgency grew, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. Finally, everything was in place. Adrian took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. All right, let's do this. Marcus, you and I will lure it out. Samantha, be ready with the syringe. Once it's in the trap, we hit it with the charge. They approached the containment unit, the creature's growls echoing through the metal walls. Adrian signaled to Marcus, and together they opened the door, their weapons raised. The creature burst out, a blur of pale skin and razor-sharp claws. It lunged at them with terrifying speed, but Adrian and Marcus managed to evade, leading it down the corridor towards the trap. Now Adrian shouted as they reached the designated area. Samantha stepped forward, her hand steady as she plunged the syringe into the creature's side. It shrieked in pain, thrashing wildly as the suppressant took effect. Adrian and Marcus quickly activated the generator, sending a powerful electric charge through the cables. The creature convulsed, its body racked with spasms as the electricity disrupted its regenerative cells. For a moment it seemed to falter, its strength waning. Adrian felt a surge of hope, but he knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Keep it up," he yelled, adjusting the generator to maintain the charge. The creature's movement slowed, its growls turning to pained whimpers. The suppressant and the electric charge were working, but Adrian knew it was only a temporary solution. They had bought themselves time, but the ultimate battle was far from over. As the creature finally collapsed, exhausted and weakened, Adrian allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had succeeded in their immediate goal, but the larger threat still loomed. "We did it," Samantha said, her voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. For now, at least. Adrian nodded, his mind already racing to the next steps. "We need to analyze the results, refine our approach. This is just the beginning. We have to find a way to end this, once and for all." The team regrouped, their spirits buoyed by their success but tempered by the knowledge of the challenges ahead. They had faced the threat head-on and emerged victorious, but the true test was still to come. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, the sense of urgency and desperation lingered, a constant reminder of the deadly game they were playing. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Adrian, Samantha, and Marcus moved through the facility, each step echoing ominously in the shadowy corridors. Their makeshift lab had provided some answers, but now it was time to put their plan into action. Every creak of the floor, every distant drip of water, seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. Adrian led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. They had identified a large storage room that would serve as the perfect trap. Its sturdy walls and single entry point made it ideal for containing SCP-3199, if everything went according to plan. "This is it," Adrian said, his voice low. "We need to set up the containment field and the sonic deterrent. Samantha, you handle the field generator. Marcus, you're on the sonic emitters." The room was a chaotic mess of broken shelves and scattered equipment. Adrian cleared a space in the center, setting up the generator and running cables to the walls. The plan was simple in theory: lure SCP-3199 into the room, activate the containment field, and hit it with a continuous sonic assault to keep it disoriented. Samantha worked quickly, her hand steady despite the tension. She connected the generator, ensuring the field would be strong enough to hold the creature. Field generator is ready, she reported, glancing at Adrian for confirmation. Good, Adrian replied, moving to help Marcus with the sonic emitters. They placed the devices strategically around the room, aiming for maximum coverage. Once the field is up, these emitters should keep it contained. Just remember, we need to be fast. If it gets out, we're in serious trouble. Marcus nodded, adjusting one of the emitters. I've got it. Let's just hope this works. They double-checked everything, the room buzzing with a mix of anticipation and dread. Adrian felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. Failure wasn't an option. All right, Adrian said, taking a deep breath. We're ready. Samantha, stay here and monitor the equipment. Marcus and I will lure it in. They left the storage room, retracing their steps to the creature's temporary containment unit. The corridors seemed even darker and more menacing now, every shadow a potential threat. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. As they approached the containment unit, the creature's growls grew louder, more agitated. It knew something was happening. Adrian signaled to Marcus, and together they unlocked the door. The creature burst out, its eyes wild and feral. Over here, Marcus shouted, waving his arms to draw its attention. The creature lunged at them, and they turned, sprinting down the corridor. It followed, its screeches echoing through the facility. Adrian and Marcus navigated the twisting passages, the creature hot on their heels. They could feel its breath on their necks, its claws scraping against the walls. Almost there, Adrian yelled, glancing back to make sure the creature was still following. They burst into the storage room, diving to the side as the creature barreled in after them. Now, Samantha, Adrian shouted. Samantha activated the field generator, and a shimmering barrier sprang up around the room's perimeter. The creature slammed into it, howling in rage and confusion. Adrian and Marcus quickly moved to the emitters, turning them on. High-pitched sounds filled the room, causing the creature to thrash and claw at the air. It's working, Samantha called out, her eyes fixed on the control panel. The field is holding, and the emitters are keeping it disoriented. Adrian watched the creature struggle, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over him. They had succeeded in trapping it, but the battle was far from over. We need to keep monitoring it. Any sign that the field is weakening, and we reinforce it immediately. Marcus nodded, still catching his breath. And what about the suppressant? We need to make sure it stays down. Agreed, Adrian said, moving to the edge of the containment field. Samantha, prepare another dose of the suppressant. We'll need to keep it sedated until we can find a permanent solution. They worked quickly, adrenaline driving them forward. The creature's roars of frustration reverberated through the room, but it couldn't break free. Adrian felt a glimmer of hope. They had a chance now, a real chance to end this nightmare. As they reinforced the field and administered another dose of the suppressant, the room fell into an uneasy silence. The creature lay still, its body heaving with each labored breath. Adrian knew they had only bought themselves a temporary reprieve, but it was enough for now. We did it, Samantha said, her voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. We actually did it. Adrian nodded, feeling the tension slowly ebb away. Yeah, we did. But we can't let our guard down. This thing is still dangerous. We need to find a way to neutralize it for good. They stood together, their resolve hardening. The trap had worked, but the true test lay ahead. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, the sense of precarious victory hung in the air, a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. The containment room was filled with an eerie quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the field generator. The creature lay still, its labored breathing a harsh reminder of the danger it posed. Adrian, Samantha, and Marcus stood on edge, knowing that their fragile victory could shatter at any moment. We need to reinforce the field, Samantha said, her voice tense. If it breaks through, we're back to square one. Marcus nodded, his face pale but resolute. "I'll check the generator. Make sure it's running at full capacity." Adrian watched as Marcus moved towards the generator, his steps careful and deliberate. Samantha began adjusting the sonic emitters, tweaking their frequency to maintain the creature's disorientation. Adrian felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. They were holding it for now, but for how long? A sudden crash echoed through the room, the sound of metal against concrete. Adrian spun around, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. Marcus was on the ground, clutching his arm in pain. The generator had short-circuited, sparks flying as the containment field flickered. "Marcus," Samantha shouted, rushing to his side. The creature's eyes snapped open, a feral light gleaming in its dark pupils. It sensed the weakness, the opportunity. With a guttural roar, it lunged at the flickering barrier, its claws slashing through the air. "Get the field back up," Adrian yelled, grabbing a metal pipe and positioning himself between the creature and his friends. Samantha scrambled to the generator, her hands shaking as she tried to reroute the power. Marcus struggled to his feet, his face contorted with pain. The creature hit the barrier again, and this time, the field shattered like glass. "Adrian, look out," Marcus shouted, his voice filled with terror. The creature burst through, its claws aimed straight at Adrian. He swung the pipe, connecting with a sickening thud, but it barely slowed the creature down. It lashed out, and Adrian felt a searing pain as its claws raked across his chest. Samantha managed to get the generator running again, the field snapping back into place, but it was too late. The creature was inside the perimeter, its eyes locked on Marcus. "No," Samantha screamed, grabbing a syringe filled with the suppressant. She charged at the creature, jabbing the needle into its side. The creature howled, its body convulsing as the suppressant took effect. It staggered, then collapsed, its limbs twitching. Adrian dropped to his knees, blood seeping through his fingers as he clutched his chest. Marcus was on the ground, his breath ragged. The creature's final attack had slashed his abdomen, blood pooling around him. Adrian crawled to his side, his vision blurring. "Marcus, hold on," Adrian gasped, trying to stem the flow of blood. "We're going to get you out of here." Marcus looked up at him, his eyes filled with pain and resignation. "Adrian, it's too late. You need to finish this. Stop it, before it gets out." "Don't talk like that," Samantha said, her voice breaking. "We can save you. We just need to." Marcus shook his head, a weak smile on his lips. "It's okay. Just promise me. Promise me you'll stop it." Adrian felt a lump in his throat. "I promise, Marcus. We'll stop it." Marcus's eyes closed, his body going limp. Adrian and Samantha were left in the silence, the weight of their loss pressing down on them. "We have to keep moving," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to stop it. For Marcus." Samantha nodded, tears streaming down her face. "For Marcus." They gathered their equipment, their movements heavy with grief. The creature lay still, the suppressant keeping it sedated for now, but they knew it was only a matter of time before it recovered. As they prepared to move out, Adrian glanced back at Marcus's still form, a fresh wave of determination washing over him. They had lost a friend, but they couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. "Let's go," Adrian said, his voice steely. "We have a job to finish." The sense of urgency was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had faced the creature and survived, but the cost had been high. Now they had to find a way to end the threat once and for all, before it claimed any more lives. The silence was suffocating. Adrian and Samantha moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, their footsteps echoing ominously. The oppressive sense of isolation weighed heavily on them, each step deeper into the abandoned structure a reminder of how alone they truly were. The loss of Marcus hung over them like a dark cloud, fueling their resolve but also deepening their despair. "Do you think we're getting close?" Samantha whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. Adrian glanced at the map they'd found in one of the offices, its edges frayed and ink smeared from years of neglect. The control room should be just ahead. If we can get the communication systems online, we can call for backup. They continued in silence, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. The facility, once a beacon of scientific advancement, was now a decaying tomb, its halls filled with shadows and the ghosts of past horrors. Adrian's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shapes on the walls. The control room door was ajar, the metal frame twisted as if something had forced its way inside. Adrian's stomach churned with unease, but he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was a chaotic mess of broken monitors and shattered glass. The main console, however, appeared mostly intact. Samantha moved to the console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "I'll see if I can get this working. Keep an eye out for anything unusual." Adrian nodded, standing guard at the doorway, his flashlight scanning the dark corners of the room. The facility seemed to close in around them, the walls pressing ever closer. He could almost feel the weight of the silence, a living thing that threatened to swallow them whole. A sudden burst of static from the console made Adrian jump. Samantha cursed under her breath, adjusting the dials and switches. "The system's fried, but I might be able to get a short-range signal out. It's our best shot." Adrian's heart sank. A short-range signal wouldn't reach far enough to call for the kind of backup they needed, but it was better than nothing. "Do it," he said. "Anything is better than staying here in the dark." Samantha worked quickly, her face a mask of concentration. Adrian could hear the distant sounds of the facility, the creaks and groans of a structure long past its prime. The shadows seemed to dance at the edge of his vision, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "I've got something," Samantha said, her voice tinged with relief. "It's weak, but it should reach the outer perimeter. I'm sending a distress signal now." As the signal transmitted, a flicker of hope sparked in Adrian's chest. It was a tenuous hope, fragile and easily shattered, but it was something to hold on to. They waited in tense silence, every second stretching into an eternity. The console crackled to life, a garbled voice coming through the speakers. "This is Delta 9, receiving your signal. Identify yourselves." Adrian stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is Dr. Adrian Keller and Dr. Samantha Ortiz. We're trapped in the SCP-3199 containment facility. We've lost one team member and are in urgent need of extraction." "Copy that, Dr. Keller," the voice replied, clearer now. "We're dispatching a team to your location. Hold tight and stay safe. Delta 9 out." Relief washed over Adrian, but it was short-lived. The sound of shuffling footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder with each passing moment. Adrian and Samantha exchanged a glance, the same thought running through their minds. SCP-3199 had found them. "We need to move," Adrian said, his voice low but urgent. "Now." They hurried out of the control room, the sense of isolation more intense than ever. The facility felt like a maze, each turn leading them deeper into a nightmare. The footsteps grew louder, closer, the creature's presence a constant, terrifying reminder of the danger they were in. "Adrian, this way," Samantha called, leading him down a narrow hallway. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a locked door. Samantha frantically worked the keypad, her hands shaking. Come on." The door clicked open, and they slipped inside, closing it just as the creature rounded the corner. Adrian held his breath, listening to the creature's heavy breathing on the other side of the door. The walls seemed to press in around them, the small room claustrophobic and stifling. "We can't keep running forever," Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible. "We need to find a way to stop it." Samantha nodded, her eyes wide with fear but resolute. "We'll find a way. We have to." The creature moved away, its footsteps fading into the distance. Adrian and Samantha took a moment to collect themselves, the oppressive sense of isolation gnawing at their resolve. They were alone in a facility that had become a tomb, surrounded by shadows and haunted by the past. As they prepared to move out, Adrian felt a steely determination settle over him. They would find a way to stop SCP-3199. They had to, for Marcus, for themselves, and for everyone else who would be at risk if the creature ever escaped this cursed place. The sense of isolation was a heavy burden, but it also sharpened their focus, driving them forward into the unknown. The air grew colder as Adrian and Samantha descended deeper into the bowels of the facility. The walls seemed to close in, the darkness pressing against their flashlight beams. Every creak, every distant sound felt amplified, their nerves strung tight as a violin string. The oppressive silence was now punctuated by an unsettling, disorienting sense of paranoia. "We need to get to the sub-basement," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's where the main lab is. If we're going to find anything useful, it'll be there." Samantha nodded, her eyes darting around the corridor. "We have to be careful. The lower we go, the more likely we are to run into it." Adrian could see the strain on her face, the same tension that gnawed at his own nerves. The facility seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the shadows deepening, twisting into shapes that whispered of danger. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something far worse, something alien and unnatural. They reached a heavy metal door marked sub-basement access. Adrian entered the code they had found in the researchers' notes, the door groaning open with a shudder. Beyond it lay a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. "Stay close," Adrian said, leading the way. Each step down felt like a journey into the heart of a nightmare. The walls were slick with moisture, the air damp and suffocating. Halfway down, Samantha stopped, her hand gripping Adrian's arm. "Did you hear that?" Adrian paused, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing but the oppressive silence. Then, faintly, he heard it, a soft, whispering sound, like a voice just out of earshot. It sent a chill down his spine. "Keep moving," he said, forcing himself to take another step. "We can't stop now." They reached the bottom of the stairs and found themselves in a long, narrow corridor. The walls were lined with doors, each marked with faded, cryptic symbols. The whispering sound was louder here, more insistent, as if the walls themselves were speaking. "What is that?" Samantha whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Adrian replied, his voice tight. "But we need to find the lab. It should be at the end of this corridor." They moved forward, the whispers growing louder, more distinct. Adrian could almost make out words now, though they were twisted, garbled, like a language he had never heard. His head began to pound, the sound digging into his mind like a claw. The lab door was reinforced steel, slightly ajar. Adrian pushed it open, and they stepped inside, their flashlights revealing a room filled with decaying equipment and scattered papers. The air was thick with dust, and the whispering sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Search the room," Adrian said, trying to focus through the pain in his head. "There has to be something here we can use." They spread out, rifling through the remnants of the lab. Adrian found a set of notes detailing the researchers' last-ditch efforts to stop SCP-3199. They spoke of a chemical compound that could disrupt its regenerative abilities, but the formula was incomplete. "Samantha," over here Adrian called, holding up the notes. "This might be what we need." Samantha hurried over, her eyes scanning the pages. "It's a start, but we need to find the rest of the formula. It has to be here somewhere." They continued their search, the oppressive atmosphere making it hard to concentrate. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Adrian felt a growing sense of unease. His vision blurred, and he shook his head, trying to clear the fog from his mind. Suddenly, the door to the lab slammed shut with a deafening bang. and the lights flickered and went out. The whispering rose to a cacophony, voices overlapping, speaking in a twisted, nightmarish chorus. Adrian, Samantha shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. "What's happening?" Adrian's flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. He felt a presence in the room, something cold and malevolent. His mind reeled, the whispers digging into his thoughts, pulling at his sanity. "We need to get out of here," Adrian said, his voice trembling. "Now." They rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Adrian felt a cold dread settle over him. It was as if the facility itself was alive, aware of their presence, and intent on keeping them trapped. Samantha frantically searched for another exit, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "There's a ventilation shaft here. It's small, but we can fit through." Adrian nodded, his heart pounding. "You go first. I'll hold the door." Samantha climbed into the shaft and Adrian followed, the metal walls closing around them. The whispers were muffled now, but still present, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. They crawled through the narrow shaft, the air growing colder, the darkness more oppressive. Adrian's mind raced, the voices in the back of his head whispering of doom and despair. He pushed forward, focusing on the task at hand, refusing to let the fear take hold. Finally, they reached the end of the shaft, emerging into another corridor. The air was slightly fresher here, but the sense of unease remained. Adrian helped Samantha out, and they stood for a moment, catching their breath. "We need to find another way to the surface," Samantha said, her voice shaky. "We can't go back the way we came." Adrian nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll find a way. We have to. But first, we need to finish the formula. It's our only hope." They continued down the corridor, the whispers fading but never truly gone. The facility seemed to pulse with a malevolent life, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. But they pressed on, driven by a desperate need to survive, to end the nightmare that had consumed them. As they moved forward, the sense of paranoia and disorientation grew. The walls seemed to shift, the corridors twisting and turning in impossible ways. But they kept going, fueled by a grim determination. Adrian knew that their struggle was far from over. The true horror lay ahead, and they would need all their strength and resolve to face it. But for now they had each other, and that was enough to keep them moving forward into the darkness. The corridors of the facility seemed to close in around them, the walls pressing tighter with every step. Adrian and Samantha moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The whispers had faded, but the sense of dread remained, a constant, gnawing presence in the back of their minds. "We need to find a secure place to finish the formula," Adrian said, his voice low. "Somewhere we can work without being interrupted." Samantha nodded, her eyes scanning the shadows. "There's an old storage room up ahead. It should be empty." They reached the storage room and slipped inside, closing the door behind them. The room was filled with dusty shelves and crates, remnants of the facility's past. Adrian cleared a space on one of the tables, spreading out the notes they had found in the lab. "Okay, let's get to work," Adrian said, pulling out the chemical samples they had gathered. "We need to complete the formula and synthesize it as quickly as possible." As they worked, the tension in the room grew palpable. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty, the shadows seeming to pulse with malevolent intent. Adrian focused on the task at hand, his mind racing as he mixed the chemicals, trying to follow the incomplete instructions. Suddenly a loud crash echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps. Adrian and Samantha froze, their eyes darting to the door. It was then that they realized they were not alone. The door burst open, and a figure stepped inside, their face hidden in the shadows. Adrian's heart pounded as the figure moved closer, their features coming into focus. It was Dr. Jonathan Brooks, one of the researchers who had supposedly perished in the initial outbreak. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Brooks," Adrian said, his voice filled with disbelief. "How are you still alive?" Brooks's eyes flicked to Adrian, then to Samantha, before settling on the note spread out on the table. "I managed to survive. Been hiding, trying to stay one step ahead of that thing." Samantha stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Why didn't you contact us? We've been fighting to contain this nightmare while you were hiding." Brooks's expression hardened. "You don't understand. I've been working on a solution, a way to stop it for good." Adrian's mind raced, trying to process the sudden appearance of their former colleague. "What do you mean? Do you have a completed formula?" Brooks shook his head, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "No, but I know what we need to do. We have to destroy the entire facility. Burn it to the ground. It's the only way to be sure." Samantha's face contorted with anger. "You're insane. We're so close to finishing the formula. We can stop it without resorting to that." Brooks stepped closer, his eyes wild. "You don't understand. This thing is smarter than we thought. It's been manipulating us, leading us into a trap. The only way to end this is to destroy everything." Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. "Brooks, what are you talking about? How could it be manipulating us?" Brooks's eyes darted around the room, his paranoia evident. "It's been in our heads, whispering to us. It knows our fears, our weaknesses. It's been using us to achieve its goals." Samantha shook her head, her voice trembling with anger. "You're letting fear control you. We need to focus on finishing the formula. It's our best chance." Brooks's expression twisted into a mask of rage. "You're wrong. And if you won't help me, I'll do it myself." Before Adrian could react, Brooks lunged at the table, grabbing the chemical samples and hurling them to the floor. Glass shattered, and the precious liquid spilled out, hissing as they mixed and reacted. "No," Adrian shouted, diving forward to try and salvage what he could. But it was too late. The formula was ruined. Samantha grabbed Brooks, trying to pull him away from the table. "What have you done? You've doomed us all." Brooks struggled, his eyes wild. "It's the only way. We have to destroy everything." Adrian managed to grab Brooks, pulling him away from Samantha. "You're not thinking clearly. We need to find another way." Brooks broke free, his face contorted with desperation. There was no other way. He turned and ran from the room, disappearing into the darkness. Samantha sank to the floor, her face buried in her hands. "What are we going to do now? We're back to square one." Adrian felt a wave of despair wash over him. The formula was gone, and with it, their best chance of stopping SCP-3199. But he knew they couldn't give up. They had to keep fighting, no matter the odds. "We'll find another way," Adrian said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let Brooks's fear destroy everything we've worked for." Samantha looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "But how? We're running out of time." Adrian took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "We'll figure it out. We have to. For Marcus, for ourselves, and for everyone else out there. We won't let this thing win." As they gathered what remained of their supplies, the sense of betrayal hung heavy in the air. Brooks's actions had set them back, but they couldn't afford to dwell on it. They had to keep moving, keep fighting, no matter what. The facility seemed darker, more menacing than ever, as they prepared to face whatever came next. The true horror of SCP-3199 was still ahead, and they would need all their strength and resolve to survive. Adrian and Samantha stood in the storage room, the broken glass and spilled chemicals at their feet. The sense of betrayal from Brooks's actions lingered in the air, but Adrian knew they couldn't afford to give in to despair. They had come too far, and too much was at stake. "We need to regroup," Adrian said, his voice steady. "We can't let Brooks's actions derail us. We have to find another way to stop SCP-3199. Samantha wiped the tears from her eyes, her expression hardening with determination. "You're right. We can't give up now. There has to be something else we can use." Adrian looked around the room, his mind racing. The storage room was filled with old equipment and forgotten supplies. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. "Let's start by gathering whatever might be useful. We need to be resourceful." They began searching through the room, pulling out anything that could potentially help them. Old medical kits, broken devices, and dusty manuals were piled up, their hands moving with a sense of urgency. "We can use these," Samantha said, holding up a bundle of wires and small electronic components. "Maybe we can rig up some kind of trap or deterrent." Adrian nodded, his mind already working on possibilities. "Good idea. We can use the sonic emitters we found earlier. If we can amplify the frequency, it might be enough to incapacitate SCP-3199 long enough for us to contain it." They worked quickly, their movements driven by a renewed sense of purpose. Adrian felt a steely resolve settle over him. They had faced betrayal and despair, but they couldn't let it break them. They had to keep fighting, for Marcus, for themselves, and for everyone else who depended on them. As they pieced together their makeshift trap, the sense of urgency pressed down on them. The facility felt more oppressive than ever, the shadows seeming to pulse with malevolent intent. But Adrian refused to let fear take hold. They had a plan, and they would see it through. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sounds the clinking of metal and the soft hum of machinery. Adrian's hands moved with precision, his mind focused on the task at hand. Every detail mattered, every connection had to be perfect. There was no room for error. "We're almost there," Samantha said, her voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Just a few more adjustments." Adrian tightened the last bolt, stepping back to admire their work. "It's not pretty, but it should work. Let's test it and make sure everything is in place." They activated the device, the room filling with a high-pitched sound that made their ears ring. It was painful, but necessary. Adrian watched as the emitters glowed, the power flowing through the makeshift circuit. "It's working," Samantha said, relief evident in her voice. "We just need to lure SCP-3199 into the trap and activate it." Adrian nodded, his resolve hardening further. "We'll set it up in the main corridor. It's the only place wide enough to ensure the creature can't escape." They moved quickly, carrying the device through the darkened hallways. The facility seemed to close in around them, the walls pressing tighter with each step. Adrian could feel the weight of their mission, the sense of impending danger. As they set up the trap, Adrian took a deep breath, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. This was their last chance, their final hope. They had to succeed. There was no other option. "Samantha, take cover behind those crates," Adrian instructed, his voice calm and steady. "I'll lure it here. Once it's in position, activate the device." Samantha's eyes met his, filled with determination. "Be careful, Adrian." He nodded, a steely resolve in his gaze. "I will. We're going to end this." Adrian moved through the corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the risks, knew the danger that lay ahead. But he also knew they had to face it head on. There was no turning back. He reached the containment area where SCP-3199 was being held. The creature sensed his presence, its eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. Adrian took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Come on, you bastard," he muttered, backing away slowly, his eyes never leaving the creature. "Follow me." The creature lunged and Adrian turned, sprinting down the corridor. He could hear the pounding of its footsteps behind him, the guttural growls growing louder. His heart raced, but he kept his focus, leading it straight into the trap. "Now, Samantha," Adrian shouted as he dove behind the crates. Samantha activated the device, the high-pitched sound filling the corridor. SCP-3199 screeched in pain, its movements faltering. Adrian watched as the creature staggered, the sonic assault overwhelming its senses. "It's working," Samantha shouted, her voice filled with triumph. Adrian emerged from his hiding place, his eyes locked on the struggling creature. They had done it. They had found a way to incapacitate it. But they couldn't afford to celebrate yet. "Keep the device running," Adrian said, moving towards the creature. "We need to contain it before it recovers." They worked quickly, securing SCP-3199 in a reinforced containment unit. The creature's roars of rage echoed through the facility, but it was trapped, unable to break free. As the device continued to hum, Adrian felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had faced betrayal and despair, but they had prevailed. Their resolve had carried them through. "We did it," Samantha said, her voice filled with exhaustion and pride. "We actually did it." Adrian nodded, a sense of calm settling over him. "Yes, we did, but we need to make sure it stays contained. We can't let our guard down." They reinforced the containment unit, ensuring every lock and seal was secure. As they finished, Adrian took a deep breath, the weight of their victory sinking in. They had faced their darkest fears, their deepest despair, and they had emerged victorious. But Adrian knew their fight was far from over. They had to ensure SCP-3199 never escaped, never threatened anyone again. As they prepared for the next steps, Adrian felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had proven their resolve, their determination to see this through. And they would continue to fight, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The reinforced containment unit hummed with power, the sonic emitters casting an eerie glow in the dimly lit corridor. Adrian and Samantha stood guard, their eyes never leaving the thrashing creature inside. The facility seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, as if it was aware of the battle raging within its walls. "We need to make sure this holds," Adrian said, his voice tense. "If SCP-3199 breaks out again, we might not be able to contain it." Samantha nodded, her face pale but resolute. "We've reinforced every lock and seal. It should hold. But we need to be ready for anything." As they spoke, a deafening crash echoed through the facility, followed by the sound of metal tearing. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. The creature had managed to breach the outer containment. It was coming for them. "Get ready," Adrian said, gripping his weapon tightly. "It's not going to stop until we're all dead." The corridor lights flickered, casting long, menacing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified by their heightened senses. They could hear the creature's heavy footsteps, the guttural growls growing closer. Suddenly the lights went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Adrian's flashlight flickered to life, casting a narrow beam of light that barely penetrated the gloom. Samantha stood beside him, her weapon at the ready. "We need to hold the line," Adrian said, his voice steady. "No matter what." The creature appeared at the end of the corridor, its eyes glinting in the flashlight beam. It moved with terrifying speed, its claws raking against the walls as it charged toward them. Adrian fired, the sound of gunshots echoing through the confined space. The bullet struck the creature, but it barely slowed, its eyes fixed on its prey. "Samantha, now," Adrian shouted. Samantha activated the sonic emitters, the high-pitched sound filling the corridor. The creature shrieked in pain, its movements faltering. But it didn't stop. It kept coming, its rage driving it forward. Adrian and Samantha stood their ground, firing their weapons in a desperate attempt to slow the creature's advance. The corridor was filled with the sounds of gunfire, the creature's roars, and the relentless hum of the sonic emitters. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with smoke and fear. The creature reached the containment unit, its claws slashing at the reinforced walls. Adrian could see the desperation in its eyes, the primal need to escape. But they couldn't let it. They had to hold the line. "Keep firing," Adrian shouted, his voice hoarse. They unleashed a barrage of bullets, each shot chipping away at the creature's resolve. The sonic emitters continued to assault its senses, the high-pitched sound driving it to the brink of madness. The creature thrashed and roared, its movements becoming more erratic. "It's weakening," Samantha yelled, her voice filled with hope. Adrian could see it too. The creature's attacks were becoming less coordinated, its strength waning. But they couldn't let their guard down. Not yet. "Don't stop," Adrian commanded. "We have to end this." With a final, desperate lunge, the creature slammed into the containment unit, its body convulsing as the sonic emitters reached a fever pitch. The reinforced walls held, the creature's roars turning to whimpers. Adrian and Samantha continued to fire, their determination unwavering. The creature collapsed, its body twitching as the last of its strength left it. The corridor fell silent, the only sound the hum of the emitters and their ragged breaths. Adrian lowered his weapon, his hands trembling. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Samantha slumped against the wall, exhaustion etched on her face. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian nodded, his eyes locked on the still form of SCP-3199. "For now, but we can't let our guard down. We need to make sure it stays contained." They moved quickly, reinforcing the containment unit and ensuring the sonic emitters remained active. The facility seemed to settle around them, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. But Adrian knew the battle was far from over. They had won this round, but the war against SCP-3199 was far from finished. As they worked, a sense of grim determination settled over them. They had faced the creature head-on and survived, but the cost had been high. They couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. Adrian looked at Samantha, seeing the same resolve in her eyes. They had come too far to turn back now. They would continue to fight, to protect humanity from the horrors that lurked in the darkness, no matter the cost. "Let's finish this," Adrian said, his voice filled with steely resolve. Samantha nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. Together. They stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The siege had tested their limits, but they had emerged stronger, more united in their purpose. They would not let SCP-3199 win. They would see this through to the end. The facility felt like a pressure cooker about to burst. Adrian and Samantha had managed to hold SCP-3199 at bay, but they knew their victory was tenuous. The creature lay motionless in the reinforced containment unit, but the facility's creaking, groaning infrastructure threatened to fail at any moment. They needed to get out, and they needed to do it now. "We have to get to the surface and call for an extraction," Adrian said, his voice filled with urgency. "This place won't hold much longer." Samantha nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "Agreed. Let's grab what we need and move." They quickly gathered their remaining supplies, stuffing what they could into backpacks. Adrian glanced at the containment unit one last time, ensuring the locks and emitters were functioning. The creature's still form was a stark reminder of the relentless danger they faced. As they moved through the corridors, every shadow seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. The facility groaned and creaked as if it were alive, sensing their desperation. The air was thick with tension, each step a reminder of how precarious their situation had become. "We need to head through the maintenance tunnels," Samantha said, consulting the facility map. "They're the quickest way to the surface, but they're not exactly safe." Adrian nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. We don't have a choice. Let's go. They descended into the maintenance tunnels, the air growing colder and more oppressive. The narrow passageways were lined with rusted pipes and broken machinery, the dim light casting eerie shadows on the walls. The sense of danger was palpable, every sound amplified by their heightened senses. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, the ground began to tremble. The facility was destabilizing, the structural integrity failing. Adrian felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. They needed to move faster. Keep going, he urged, his voice tense. We're running out of time. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a massive steel door. It was partially open, the rusted metal groaning as it strained against the hinges. Beyond it lay the final stretch of tunnel leading to the surface. Samantha approached the door, her eyes scanning the mechanism. It's stuck. We need to force it open. Adrian joined her, their combined strength slowly prying the door open. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the tunnel, a cacophony that sent shivers down Adrian's spine. They pushed harder, their muscles straining with the effort. Almost there, Samantha grunted, her face red with exertion. With a final heave, the door swung open, revealing the dark tunnel beyond. Adrian and Samantha stepped through, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The air was colder here, the scent of earth and decay filling their nostrils. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. The ground continued to tremble, the facility's collapse imminent. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest, the urgency of their situation pressing down on him. We're close, Samantha said, her voice filled with hope. The exit is just ahead. They reached a ladder leading up to a hatch. Adrian climbed first, his hands trembling as he gripped the rungs. He pushed the hatch open, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stifling tunnels below. He climbed out, helping Samantha through the hatch. The night sky was a welcome sight, the stars shining brightly above them. Adrian took a deep breath, the fresh air filling his lungs. They were free, but their ordeal was far from over. We need to signal for extraction, Samantha said, pulling a flare from her backpack. Adrian nodded, watching as she ignited the flare, the bright light cutting through the darkness. They stood together, the flare's glow illuminating their faces, a beacon of hope in the night. As they waited for rescue, the ground beneath them continued to tremble. The facility was collapsing, the sounds of destruction echoing through the night. Adrian felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had escaped, but the battle was far from finished. We did it, Samantha said, her voice filled with exhaustion and triumph. We made it out. Adrian nodded, his mind already racing with the next steps. Yes, but we need to make sure SCP-3199 stays contained. We can't let it escape. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, their lights cutting through the darkness. Adrian felt a wave of relief. They were going to be rescued, but he knew their fight was far from over. As the rescue team landed, Adrian and Samantha were ushered into the helicopters. The sense of urgency was palpable, the rescue team's faces grim as they assessed the situation. We need to ensure the facility is sealed, Adrian said to the team leader, his voice filled with determination. SCP-3199 cannot be allowed to escape. The team leader nodded, his expression serious. We'll take care of it. You two have done enough. As the helicopters lifted off, Adrian looked out at the collapsing facility below. They had survived, but the battle was far from over. They needed to ensure SCP-3199 was contained to protect humanity from the horrors they had faced. We'll see this through, Adrian said, his voice filled with steely resolve. Samantha nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination. Together. As the helicopters flew into the night, the sense of relief was tempered by the knowledge of the fight still ahead. They had escaped, But their mission was far from complete. They would continue to fight, to protect humanity from the darkness that lurked below. The helicopters touched down at a secure military base, the rotors slicing through the air with a deafening roar. Adrian and Samantha were quickly ushered into a briefing room, their faces lined with exhaustion, but their eyes burning with determination. The facility might have been left behind, but the true battle was still ahead of them. Colonel Jensen, a stern-faced officer with a military bearing, stood at the head of the table. He wasted no time, getting straight to the point. Dr. Keller, Dr. Ortiz, we've analyzed the data you transmitted. SCP-3199 is an existential threat. We need to eliminate it permanently. Adrian nodded, his mind racing. We need to make sure it never escapes. What's the plan? Jensen activated a holographic display, showing a detailed layout of the facility and the surrounding area. We're deploying a tactical team to infiltrate the facility, neutralize SCP-3199, and collapse the structure entirely. You two will guide the team. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. We know the facility's layout and the creature's behavior. We can help, but we need to be prepared for anything. This thing is smart and incredibly dangerous. Jensen nodded, his expression grim. Understood. We leave in 1 hour. Gear up and be ready. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Adrian and Samantha suited up in tactical gear, the weight of their weapons and equipment a stark reminder of the gravity of their mission. As they moved through the base, the sense of urgency was palpable. Soldiers and technicians moved with purpose, their faces set in grim determination. Adrian, Samantha said, her voice steady despite the tension. We've come this far. We can do this. He nodded, a steely resolve in his eyes. We have to. For Marcus. For everyone. The tactical team assembled at the helipad, their faces hard and focused. Adrian and Samantha joined them, the roar of the helicopters drowning out any last-minute doubts. As they lifted off, the ground fell away beneath them, the dark outline of the facility looming in the distance. The flight was tense, each passing moment bringing them closer to the final confrontation. Adrian reviewed the facility layout on his tablet, marking key points and strategizing their approach. Samantha double-checked their equipment, her movements precise and methodical. We'll enter through the main access tunnel, Adrian said, his voice carrying over the roar of the engines. Once inside, we'll split into 2 teams. One will set the charges to collapse the structure. The other will draw SCP-3199 into the containment area. The team leader, Sergeant Harris, nodded. Understood. We'll follow your lead. The helicopters touched down a safe distance from the facility, the team disembarking quickly and moving into formation. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds the rustle of gear and the distant rumble of collapsing structures. Adrian and Samantha led the way, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The main access tunnel yawned open before them, a black maw that seemed to swallow the light. They moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. Stay sharp, Adrian whispered, his voice tense. We don't know where it might be. As they moved deeper into the facility, the air grew colder, the sense of foreboding almost palpable. The walls were lined with twisted metal and broken equipment, the remnants of the previous battles a stark reminder of the creature's power. They reached the main junction and split into 2 teams. Adrian led the team setting the charges, while Samantha took the lead on drawing SCP-3199 into the containment area. Each step forward was filled with tension, every shadow a potential threat. Adrian and his team worked quickly, placing charges at key structural points. The facility groaned and creaked around them, the sense of imminent collapse at constant pressure. He glanced at his watch, the minutes ticking away with agonizing slowness. Samantha, how's it going on your end? Adrian's voice crackled over the radio. We're in position, Samantha replied, her voice steady. No sign of the creature yet, but it's only a matter of time. Adrian finished setting the last charge and signaled his team to move out. "We're done here. Heading to your position now." As they made their way to the containment area, a deafening roar echoed through the facility. SCP-3199 had found them. The ground shook with the force of its movements, the walls trembling as it closed in. "Move, move," Adrian shouted, urging his team forward. They reached the containment area just as SCP-3199 burst into view, its eyes blazing with fury. Samantha activated the sonic emitters, the high-pitched sound filling the air. The creature shrieked in pain, its movements faltering, but it kept coming. "Draw it into the center," Adrian shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. The team fired their weapons, driving the creature back toward the containment area. It thrashed and roared, but the combined assault of bullets and sonic waves drove it into position. Adrian could see the desperation in its eyes, the primal need to escape. "Now, Samantha," he yelled. Samantha hit the switch, the reinforced containment unit slamming shut around SCP-3199. The creature roared in fury, but it was trapped, unable to break free. The team held their breath, the moment stretching into eternity. "Charges are set," Adrian said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. "Let's get out of here." They moved quickly, the ground shaking as the charges detonated. The facility began to collapse, the walls and ceiling crumbling around them. Adrian and Samantha led the way, their hearts pounding as they raced against time. They burst out of the main access tunnel, the night air a welcome relief. The ground rumbled beneath them as the facility collapsed, a cloud of dust and debris rising into the sky. They had done it. They had contained SCP-3199 and destroyed the facility. Adrian turned to Samantha, a weary smile on his face. "We did it." Samantha nodded, her eyes filled with exhaustion and triumph. "Yes, we did." The team gathered around, their faces etched with relief and determination. They had faced the creature and survived. But Adrian knew the fight was far from over. They had won this battle, but they had to remain vigilant. SCP-3199 was contained, but the threat it represented was ever present. As they boarded the helicopters, Adrian felt a sense of resolve settle over him. They would continue to fight, to protect humanity from the darkness that lurked in the shadows. They had faced the final battle and emerged victorious, but their mission was far from complete. "We'll see this through," Adrian said, his voice filled with steely determination. Samantha nodded, her eyes reflecting the same resolve. Together. As the helicopters lifted off, the facility a smoldering ruin below, Adrian knew they had made a difference. They had faced the nightmare and survived, and they would continue to fight, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The helicopters flew through the night, the distant glow of the destroyed facility fading into darkness. Adrian and Samantha sat in tense silence, the weight of their victory tempered by the knowledge of the ongoing threat. The air was thick with exhaustion, but their minds were sharp, focused on what needed to be done next. As they approached the temporary base set up by the military, the helicopters descended, kicking up a whirlwind of dust and debris. Adrian and Samantha disembarked, their boots hitting the ground with purpose. Colonel Jensen awaited them, his expression grave. "Good work," Jensen said, his voice steady. "But we've detected something disturbing. SCP-3199's signal is still active. It's not over yet." Adrian felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "We collapsed the facility. It should be contained." Jensen shook his head, gesturing to a nearby tent where a team of scientists and soldiers huddled around a monitor. "We've detected a secondary containment breach. There's a network of tunnels beneath the facility that we didn't know about. SCP-3199 is on the move." Samantha's eyes widened with shock. "How did we miss this?" "We didn't have all the information," Jensen replied. But now we do. We need to act fast. The creature is heading towards a populated area. If it gets out, it'll be catastrophic. Adrian clenched his fists, his mind racing. We have to stop it, whatever it takes. Jensen nodded. We're mobilizing a strike team. You two are the only ones who know the creature's behavior well enough to lead the mission. Are you in? Adrian glanced at Samantha, seeing the same resolve in her eyes. We're in. The strike team assembled quickly, their faces set in grim determination. Adrian and Samantha briefed them on the plan: infiltrate the tunnels, locate SCP-3199, and neutralize it once and for all. There was no room for error. Lives were at stake. They descended into the tunnels, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. The walls were close, the darkness pressing in around them. Every step echoed ominously, a reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. Adrian felt a sense of foreboding, but he pushed it aside. They had a job to do. Stay sharp, Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. We need to find it before it finds us. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth of darkness and danger. The team moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They reached a large chamber, the air growing colder. Adrian could sense the creature's presence, a malevolent force lurking just beyond the light. There, Samantha said, pointing to a dark shape in the corner of the chamber. SCP-3199 stood motionless, its eyes glinting with a predatory light. Adrian raised his weapon, signaling the team to spread out. We need to surround it. Don't give it any room to escape. The team moved into position, their weapons trained on the creature. SCP-3199 snarled, its muscles tensing as it prepared to attack. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. On my signal, Adrian said, his voice steady. 3, 2, 1. Now. The team opened fire, the chamber erupting with the sound of gunfire and the screeches of the creature. SCP-3199 lunged, its claws slashing through the air. The team held their ground, their determination unyielding. But SCP-3199 was relentless. It moved with terrifying speed, its attacks precise and deadly. One of the soldiers was caught in its claws, his scream echoing through the chamber as he fell. The team tightened their formation, but the creature's fury was unrelenting. We need to draw it away, Samantha shouted, her voice filled with desperation. It's too strong. Adrian's mind raced. They needed a diversion, something to give the team a chance to regroup. His eyes fell on a bundle of explosives strapped to one of the soldiers. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. Samantha, cover me, Adrian yelled, grabbing the explosives. What are you doing? She shouted, her eyes wide with fear. Just trust me, Adrian said, a steely resolve in his voice. He moved quickly, the creature's attention momentarily diverted by the team's gunfire. Adrian sprinted towards SCP-3199, the explosives clutched tightly in his hands. The creature turned, its eyes locking onto him with a predatory gleam. Adrian, no, Samantha screamed, realizing his plan. Adrian didn't stop. He reached the creature, slamming the explosives against its chest. SCP-3199 roared in fury, its claws raking across his body. Adrian felt a searing pain, but he held on, his fingers finding the detonator. For Marcus, he whispered, his voice filled with determination. For everyone. He pressed the detonator, the explosion ripping through the chamber. The force of the blast threw him back, the heat and pressure overwhelming. The last thing he saw was SCP-3199's form disintegrating in the fiery blast. Darkness consumed him, the pain fading as consciousness slipped away. Adrian felt a sense of peace, knowing he had done everything he could to stop the creature. When he awoke, the chamber was in ruins, the air thick with smoke and debris. He felt a hand on his shoulder, Samantha's face coming into focus. "Adrian, you did it," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You stopped it." He managed a weak smile, the pain in his body a distant memory. "We did it," he whispered. "Together." The team gathered around, their faces filled with relief and gratitude. They had faced the nightmare and emerged victorious. Adrian felt a sense of closure, knowing they had finally ended the threat of SCP-3199. As they made their way back to the surface, the sense of sacrifice lingered in the air. They had lost friends, faced unimaginable horrors, but they had prevailed. Adrian knew their fight was far from over, but for now they could rest, knowing they had made a difference. "Thank you, Adrian," Samantha said, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved us all." He nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. "We did it together," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "And we'll keep fighting, no matter what comes next." As they emerged into the light of dawn, Adrian felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and won, and they would continue to protect humanity, no matter the cost. Adrian lay on the gurney in the makeshift infirmary, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor a steady reminder that he was still alive. His body ached, each breath a painful reminder of the final battle with SCP-3199. But they had done it. The creature was gone. As he opened his eyes, he saw Samantha sitting beside him, her face etched with relief and exhaustion. "Hey," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Adrian replied, managing a weak smile. "But I'm alive. That's what matters." Samantha nodded, her eyes glistening. "We did it, Adrian. We stopped it. The threat is over." Adrian's mind was a haze of memories and pain, but the sense of accomplishment was clear. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious. He tried to sit up, wincing as a sharp pain shot through his side. "Easy," Samantha said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You need to rest. The medics said you'll make a full recovery, but you need time." Adrian nodded, leaning back against the pillows. "What about the team? Did everyone make it out?" Samantha's expression darkened slightly. "We lost a few good people, but most of us made it. And we owe that to you. Your sacrifice made the difference." Adrian felt a lump in his throat. The faces of the fallen flashed through his mind, their sacrifices weighing heavily on his heart. But they had done what they had to do. They had protected humanity from a terrible threat. "We did it together," he said, his voice firm. "I couldn't have done it without you." Samantha smiled, a mix of sadness and pride in her eyes. "And I couldn't have done it without you. We made a great team." As the hours passed, Adrian's strength slowly returned. He was briefed by Colonel Jensen, who confirmed that SCP-3199 had been completely destroyed. The threat was gone, and the facility was being sealed permanently to prevent any further dangers from emerging. "You've done a great service to humanity," Jensen said, his tone solemn. "We can't thank you enough." Adrian nodded, his mind still reeling from the events. "Just doing what needed to be done. I'm glad it's over." As night fell, Adrian found himself alone in the infirmary, the weight of the past weeks settling over him. He closed his eyes, the memories of the battles, the losses, and the victories playing out in his mind. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but so was the grief for those they had lost. Suddenly the silence was shattered by the distant sound of an alarm. Adrian's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding. He struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain. Samantha burst into the room, her face pale with fear. "What's happening?" Adrian demanded, his voice filled with urgency. "There's been a breach," Samantha said, her voice trembling. "We don't know how, but something's triggered the alarms. We need to get out of here." Adrian swung his legs over the side of the gurney, his body protesting with every movement. "We need to move. Now." They rushed through the corridors of the base, the alarms blaring around them. Soldiers and personnel were scrambling, the sense of panic palpable. Adrian's mind raced, the familiar dread creeping back into his thoughts. Had they missed something? Was SCP-3199 truly gone? They reached the exit, the night air a stark contrast to the chaos inside. The sounds of helicopters filled the air, their blades slicing through the darkness. Colonel Jensen approached them, his face grim. "We're evacuating," Jensen said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We've detected an unknown signal, similar to SCP-3199's. We can't take any chances." Adrian felt a surge of anger and frustration. "We destroyed it. How can this be happening?" "We don't know," Jensen replied. "But we need to get you out of here. We'll handle it." Adrian and Samantha were ushered into a helicopter, the sense of urgency pressing down on them. As the helicopter lifted off, Adrian looked out at the base below, the lights and sounds of chaos fading into the distance. Samantha sat beside him, her face etched with worry. "What if it's not over, Adrian? What if there's more?" Adrian took her hand, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll face it, together. We've come this far. We won't stop now." The helicopter flew into the night, the stars shining brightly above them. Adrian felt a sense of determination settle over him. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but their fight was not yet finished. They would continue to protect humanity, no matter the cost. As they flew towards an uncertain future, Adrian knew one thing for certain: they would face whatever came next together, and they would not falter. The battle was far from over, but they were ready. The helicopter touched down at a remote outpost, far from the chaos and destruction they had left behind. Adrian and Samantha stepped out, the cool night air a welcome relief. They had faced unimaginable horrors, and though they had emerged victorious, the toll was evident in their weary expressions and battle-scarred bodies. Colonel Jensen greeted them, his face lined with exhaustion but filled with a grim satisfaction. "We've secured the area. The threat is neutralized for now, but we need to stay vigilant." Adrian nodded, his mind still racing with the events of the past hours. "We need to make sure it stays that way. No more surprises." Jensen led them to a debriefing room, where a small team of scientists and military personnel awaited. The room was filled with charts, monitors, and the faint hum of machinery. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield, a place where they could finally catch their breath and plan their next move. "We've analyzed the data from the facility," one of the scientists said, her voice steady but laced with tension. "The network of tunnels was more extensive than we realized. It's possible there are other entities we haven't detected yet." Samantha's eyes widened. "You mean there could be more SCP-3199s out there?" The scientist nodded. "It's a possibility. We need to conduct thorough scans and secure all potential entry points. We can't afford to take any chances." Adrian felt a heavy weight settle over him. They had come so far, fought so hard, but the battle was far from over. "What's our next step?" Jensen spoke up, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll set up a perimeter around the entire area. Full surveillance, constant monitoring. We'll need your expertise to guide us to make sure we don't miss anything." Adrian and Samantha exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in this together, and they wouldn't stop until the threat was completely eradicated. "We're with you," Adrian said, his voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." The next few days were a blur of activity. The outpost buzzed with energy as teams worked around the clock to secure the area. Drones scanned the landscape, searching for any signs of movement. Surveillance cameras were set up, their feeds monitored by a dedicated team of analysts. Adrian and Samantha threw themselves into the work, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of the ongoing threat. They reviewed data, planned strategies, and coordinated with the military teams. It was a relentless pace, but they knew it was necessary. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the outpost, Adrian stood on a hill overlooking the area. The sense of isolation was profound, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they were making a difference. Samantha joined him, her face illuminated by the fading light. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Even after everything, there's still so much beauty in the world." Adrian nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's worth fighting for, all of it." She took his hand, a gesture of solidarity and hope. "We'll get through this, Adrian. Together." As they stood there, the weight of their mission pressed down on them, but so did the sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. They had lost friends, but their sacrifices had not been in vain. The outpost was a beacon of hope, a testament to their resilience and determination. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had also proven that humanity could endure, could fight back against the darkness. Adrian knew that their battle was far from over, but he also knew they were ready. They would continue to protect humanity, to ensure that the horrors they had faced would never threaten the world again. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Adrian felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had come through the fire, and they would continue to stand strong. The future was uncertain, but they would face it together with unwavering resolve. "Let's get back to work," Adrian said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Samantha smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. Together. And with that, they turned back to the outpost, ready to face whatever came next. They were survivors, protectors, and they would never give up. Not until the world was safe.